Hi everyone, welcome to this week's Megaport Tech Drop-In. My name is Mark Austin. I'm a pre-sales solution architect at Megaport, based in Sydney, Australia. I work with our customers to design and architect Megaport products and products that run on Megaport, such as network and security virtual appliances and also cloud connectivity. So today we're going to be talking around or about Megaport Global WAN or building global WAN networks with Megaport. And I'll be doing a demo of how you do that in our portal. Before that, I'll just touch on a few bits and pieces around Megaport products for those that are not familiar, but I won't go into depth with those. So I'll get started. So Megaport runs a global network as a service platform, which extends into around 860 data centers globally. The network itself is Megaport's network end-to-end. So we have our network devices extended into all of those data center locations. And you can build private network connectivity from any point on that network to any other point. We additionally have virtualized products, which you don't need to be present in a data center, and I'll touch on those in a little bit. So when you're looking at building out connectivity with private connectivity with Megaport, you're looking at starting maybe in a data center. You may have a rack. You may be located in that data center. You will look at using what we call a port at either 1 gig, 10 gig, or 100 gig. You will then use a virtual cross connect. That's the box in the middle. So that is a point-to-point private VLAN essentially, which will connect you either to another port in a data center somewhere on the network fabric, or it will connect you to another party, such as a cloud provider or one of many different service providers on our marketplace. If you are not present in a data center, you can still use Megaport by using either the Megaport Cloud Router or the Megaport Virtual Edge. So what the Megaport Cloud Router does, it is a virtual router which is available in around 100 locations globally that runs on Megaport's own compute that will connect two endpoints on the Megaport global network together. Generally, the Megaport Cloud Router is used for building multi-cloud connectivity, so between two or more different cloud providers. So if you're looking at connecting AWS to Azure or to Google or to Oracle, you can do that using the Megaport Cloud Router, or privately high-speed SLA-backed connectivity. The Megaport Virtual Edge is also available in around 100 locations globally. And what that allows you to do is, or enables you to do, is spin up a virtual network appliance from a number of different vendors, or a virtual security appliance, such as a firewall from a number of different security vendors. And that firewall or network virtual appliance can do the same thing as the MCR, so connecting multiple clouds together, or act as an SD-WAN gateway for a region, which will then connect into cloud. So it'll enable branch to cloud connectivity. So each of these products, or all of these products, can be deployed instantly through the Megaport portal, either using the portal itself, so clicking through an automated workflow, or by using the API or Terraform provider. So what I'm going to talk a little bit more around today is building out global connectivity using a number of different Megaport products, and we refer to that as global WAN. So given we have a global network extending into 860 data centers globally, we we can provide reach into a lot of different global locations. So to build connectivity across Megaport, you're either looking at using a port in a data center, the Megaport Cloud Router, or a Megaport Virtual Edge. And you can see on this slide, the white lines themselves, they are what's called the virtual cross connect, connecting two different endpoints on the Megaport network. And they may be a port, two different ports, or a port and an MCR. And just following a pattern, you can build out global private connectivity using those components. So I've got a global WAN example here, and what this example consists of, if you're looking at the left-hand side first, I've got two Megaport cloud routers deployed in Singapore and two data center ports also deployed in Singapore. Each of the data center ports connects to both of the MCRs locally in Singapore, and the MCRs in Singapore are connected together using a VXC. The MCRs in Singapore then connect across to two different MCRs in Sydney, Australia. And the MCRs in Sydney are connected to two data center ports in Sydney, all using VXC. So the white lines you see on this slide are the point-to-point private connectivity. So once you've built out that connectivity, you can look at adding additional services to the MCR, which then become available to all endpoints on the topology you see here on the slide. So looking at Singapore, top left, you can see the MCR in Singapore is connected to Megaport Internet and also a cloud provider. And that cloud provider could be AWS, Azure, Google, or Oracle, or a number of different service providers that are available on our fabric. So what I've done is mirrored out that pattern to the other MCR in Singapore and also the MCRs in Sydney, in the Sydney location. So once you've done this type of topology, those services become available to all endpoints on the network, so the MCRs and the ports. So basically, they become a common service. So what the Megaport fabric is providing here by using the MCR is a layer 3 routed connectivity between Singapore and Sydney, and the internet and also the cloud providers connected to the MCRs. So what I'm going to show in the demo is how you would build that out. And I'm not going to build out the entire fabric just given time. I'm just going to build out a simple topology between Singapore and Sydney using data center ports and an MCR in each location. So if you look at the previous slide, you'll see there, it's just say the bottom half of the slide without the internet and the cloud provider. So it's quite easy once you've built that to then replicate the other components. So I'll switch to the portal and we can look at how that looks to build out. So this is the Megaport portal without any services deployed. And you'll see there's a orange or yellow banner saying this is a non-production environment. So I'm actually using the staging portal. So we have a simulated environment that you can use to test and try out different topologies before actually deploying them in production. And that's available to anyone that has an account with Megaport. And you can set up an account instantly by just going to megaport.com and creating an account. And then it takes 24 hours for the staging environment to be created, and then you can log into that and start trying some different topologies and different designs in the staging portal. So I'll just get started here, and I'm going to create the MCRs first. So you can see I've got the Create MCR button, and I'll create the MCR in Sydney first. So let's have a look at where I can do that in Sydney. So in Sydney, we've got 5 different locations that we have our compute located. They're basically availability zones, so you can deploy the MCR in any of these. So they're all pretty much equal. So I'll just choose one of those locations. The next step is to choose the throughput capability of the MCR. So it's available in 1, 2.5, or 5 or 10 gigabits throughput. For this example, I'll just choose 1 gigabit. I'll give it a name. I'll call it Sydney MCR. And you're given different pricing options here. So no subscription means it's a per minute billing model. So you can run this for an hour and you'll just be charged for 1 hour's use, or you could lock it into a term if you wanted. The last thing we need to do is choose a BGP ASN to be deployed. So we're deploying effectively a BGP router. So we need to give it a BGP ASN, and you can either use your own public ASN or you could use private ASN. That's up to you. And you can use a different ASN per MCR if you'd like. So I'll just put in here 65,000.0.0.1. Click next, and I'll add the MCR to the configured services. You can see that on the left there. So I'm going to go ahead and add a second MCR in Singapore. You can see in Singapore, we have 7 locations that we have our compute located that will host the MCR. And you can choose one of those to deploy the MCR in Singapore. I'll choose 1 gigabit per second throughput, and we'll call this Singapore MCR. Again, I will choose no subscription for that, and I will configure the BGP ASN as 65,002. Okay, so we've built out the second MCR. So the next step is to join the MCRs together. So going to the Sydney MCR, I'll use that as the starting point for the connection. I'll select the connection option. You'll see here from the MCR, you have a number of different endpoint connection types to choose. So you can choose a cloud provider. So that is a private cloud on-ramp. A private VXC, that is connecting to any other Megaport service, such as a port MCR MVE. You can connect it to the internet, or the marketplace, which is we have a number of different service providers on there, such as WebEx, Zoom, Cloudflare, etc., that you can connect to privately. And the last one there is a service key. So if you wanted to connect across accounts, so you're connecting to another third party, they can give you a service key to connect to their service. So I just want to join the 2 MCRs together. So I'm going to select private VXC, and you can see here the endpoint that I have available here is the MCR in Singapore. So I'll click next. And I'll just call this VXE, the Sydney to Singapore VXE. The next step is to assign a speed to that. So you can generally with VXEs, you can go anywhere from 1 megabits per second up to 100 gigabits per second. In this case, you can see it shows a max speed of 1,000 megabits per second because the MCRs that are connecting both endpoints are limited to 1 gigabit per second. But each MCR can support up to 25 VXCs, each at 1,000 megabits per second. So in this case, I'll just put this as 200 megabits per second. And again, we're given a pricing options. You can do this at no subscription, which is per minute billing model. That gives you the capability to scale up the speed and scale down the speed whenever you like, and the pricing will be readjusted for the month. The other option you have is to put it on term, and you still have the ability to scale up and scale back down to the speed that you've committed to on term. So in this case, I'll just select no subscription and click next. So what we're going into here, the next step is, you can see at the top here, MCR AND. We need to assign an IP address to the MCR interface. So this is essentially configuring the virtual router. So I'm just going to put an IP address in here, 10.1.1.1/30. And I'm going to configure a BGP peer on this MCR to point to the other MCR in Singapore. So I'll select the local address. The peer address will be the other end, which will be 1.1.2. And the peer ASN, if you remembered what I entered for the MCR, was 65,002. So I'll add that and click Next. Now, the next step is you can see here MCR BN configuration. So this is the Singapore MCR. I'm going to put the IP address in for that and configure the BGP session for that, which is, so we're pointing back to the Sydney MCR. So that'll be 10.1.1.1. And the peer ASN will be 65,001. Okay, so we've pretty much done everything that needs to be done to join the two MCRs together and bring up a BGP session. So that's the summary information. I'm going to add the VXC. You can see here we're showing the design before it's been deployed. So I'm going to go ahead and hit order. And last step to deploy. And just mentioning again, you can do this using the Megaport API, which is documented at dev.megaport.com, or you can use the Megaport Terraform provider to do exactly this thing, which if you just search for Megaport Terraform, you will see the details on that. So that's now deploying in Sydney and Singapore. And just remembering this is a simulated environment, so I'm not actually deploying VMs on the compute to run up the MCRs or deploying the links, but exactly the same thing in production to do this. So the next steps while that is deploying is to create the data center ports in Sydney and Singapore. So I'm going to create a port first in Sydney. And I'll choose a data center to do that in. To deploy the port, any data center is fine. I'll choose the port as 10 gigabits per second. I'll call this Sydney port 1. And again, we're given pricing options. You can do month by month or termed. I'll just choose 1 month in this instance. We're also given other options here if I wanted to create a pair of diverse ports, which are on separate Megaport edge devices, or if I wanted to lag the ports to create basically a port channel. So we don't want to do that with this example, so I'll just go ahead and click Next and add the port. The next step, once I've done that, is to join the port to the MCR. So if I hit connection on the port, again, I'll select private VXC. So we want to join the port to the MCR. And I'm presented with options, which MCR do I want to connect to? And given Megaport has a global fabric, you can connect from one point to any point on the network. So you can see here, I'm being presented with also the MCR in Singapore. So there's nothing stopping me connecting the port in Sydney to the MCR in Singapore. But given we're building out global WAN and we want it to be scalable and flexible and follow a model, I'm going to connect the port in Sydney to the MCR in Sydney. So the next step there is to just give it a name, and I'll do Sydney port to MCR. And the speed, I'll just make that 1 gig. And I need to assign a VLAN to the port. So this will be the VLAN configured on the hardware that connects, or the customer device that connects into Megaport. So you can choose anything within the 2 to 4093 range. And I'll just choose VLAN 300 in this case. And again, I'll just choose no subscription, click Next. And the next step here in the automated workflow, I'm getting asked for an IP address for the MCR. So we'll choose a different IP address in this case. We'll choose 10.10.10.2.1 for the MCR, and 10.2.2.2 would be configured on the device that connects into Megaport, the customer device. And I'll also configure a BGP session, which would point at the customer device. And customer device may have a peer ASN of 65,010. So, okay, so I'll click Next, add that VXC. So you can see there we've deployed we've built out the design for the port in the data center in Sydney connecting to the MCR. So the next or the last step is to build out the Singapore port. So I'll just select a location in Singapore and I'll select one of the data centers there. Again, I'll select 10 gig and we'll call this the Singapore port 1. And I'll choose month to month. Next. So I'll add that port. And the next thing I'll do is join that port to the MCR in Singapore using a private VXC. So you can see there, I'm now, as I've built things out, you can see I've been presented with more and more endpoints available within this account to connect to. So I'll choose the Singapore MCR for this one. And we'll call it Singapore port to MCR. The rate limit I'll choose is 1 gig. And we'll give it VLAN, just give it VLAN 300 also. So just remember, we've built out a routed network here using the MCR. So the VLAN is only locally significant to the port. Traffic will enter the port and be directed to the MCR where it will then be routed. So I'll choose no subscription for the pricing. Click next. I need to allocate an IP address to the MCR in Singapore for this connection. So I'll give that 10.3.3.1 and I'll add the BGP session, which will point at the customer edge device in Singapore. So the peer ASN for that device, we'll say it's using 65,011. Click next and add the VXC. So you can see there, we're ready to go with the Singapore port connecting to the MCR in Singapore and also the Sydney port connecting to the Sydney MCR. So I will deploy that by hitting order. And the last step there, just make sure we want to deploy it. We do, so I'll hit order again. And that will then start to deploy the services. Okay, so as you can see, we've started to build these services out now in Singapore and Sydney. And we can jump to the dashboard and take a look at what that looks like. So you can see here, we built out the Sydney to Singapore connectivity. This is the VXC, the private point-to-point connectivity joining the two MCRs together, which we set at 200 meg. And if we zoom into Singapore, you can see here the MCR, which is running in the NTT data center on the Megaport compute, connecting to the port in Singapore in Digital Realty in Singapore. And that's connected to the MCR using also a VXC at 1 gigabits per second. And that's still deploying. So that has not come up yet. We zoom back to Sydney and jump in there. You can see we've got the MCR running in data center in Sydney, connecting to a port also in Sydney, and that's still deploying, so that has not come up yet. So one last thing I'm going to show, if you wanted to adjust the speed of the VXC, you can do that by selecting the VXC, coming into this details page, and maybe you want to go up to 500 megabits per second, and we will save that just there, and that's all it takes to change the speed. So we'll give you the current charge and the new monthly charge. If you were to keep it at 500 megabits per second, you can always come back and change it to whatever speed you require at any time, and that's an instant change. So I'll save that to 500 meg. We jump back to the dashboard, and you can see now the VXC is running at 500 megabits per second. So that completes the demo and completes the presentation. I don't believe there are any questions, so I will hand it back over to Dave. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Mark, and thank you to all our viewers via Zoom and via LinkedIn live streaming. We hope to see you all back here next week, same time, same channel, for Megaport Tech Drop-In Lives. If you do have any questions for our amazing essays, please click the link in the Q&A panel now, or check out the recording via LinkedIn and we can answer all your questions. Thanks again. Have a great weekend and we'll see you next week.